November 18, 1978. Deep in the jungle of Guyana, more than 900 men, women, and children lay dead. Their bodies sprawled in rows, cups of poisoned drink clutched in their hands. At the center of it all stood one man's voice, the voice of Jim Jones. To understand how one preacher led nearly 1,000 people to their deaths in what became the largest mass suicide in modern history, we need to go back decades earlier, to the rise of a man who started as a hopeful dreamer and ended as one of the most terrifying cult leaders the world has ever known. Jim Jones was born in 1931 in Indiana. From the beginning, he was different. Neighbors described him as a strange boy, obsessed with religion and death. By the time he was a teenager, he was holding mock church services for other kids in the neighborhood, preaching fiery sermons and mimicking the pastors he idolized. But Jones wasn't interested in traditional religion. He was fascinated with power, how preachers could control people's emotions, make them cry, and make them give money. He studied not only the Bible, but also the speeches of famous revolutionaries, blending faith with radical politics. By the 1950s, Jones had become a pastor. His church in Indianapolis was called the People's Temple. It began as a progressive Christian congregation focused on racial equality, feeding the poor, and helping the homeless. In a time when segregation still dominated America, Jones welcomed black members into leadership roles and preached integration. This message attracted hundreds and eventually thousands. To many, Jones looked like a visionary, a preacher who cared about justice. But behind the scenes, something darker was growing. He demanded loyalty. Members who questioned him were shamed or expelled. He began calling himself a prophet, insisting he could heal the sick through faith. Followers fainted at his touch, shouted in ecstasy when he spoke. It was the birth of his cult of personality. By the late 1960s, Jones was paranoid. He believed America was on the brink of nuclear war, and he feared government persecution. So he moved his congregation to California, setting up the People's Temple headquarters in San Francisco. In California, the People's Temple exploded in numbers. Jones became a political force, endorsing candidates, appearing with mayors, and positioning himself as a champion for the poor. At its peak, the temple had thousands of members and millions of dollars in assets. But his control also deepened. Members were pressured to give up their paychecks, their homes, even custody of their children. Families were split apart, with Jones insisting he was the true father of the movement. He ordered loyalty tests, where members had to drink cups of liquid he claimed was poisoned, only to laugh afterward and reveal it was just a drill. These rehearsals for mass suicide would later prove chillingly prophetic. By the mid-1970s, journalists and former members began exposing Jones's abuses, beatings, sexual exploitation, financial fraud. The pressure was building. Jones needed a way out. In 1974, he found it. The government of Guyana, in South America, offered him land deep in the jungle. Jones saw his chance to build a utopia far from the eyes of the press and U.S. authorities. He called it Jonestown. Jonestown was pitched as a socialist paradise. Hundreds of followers sold their possessions, left their families, and moved to Guyana to start fresh. When they arrived, they found a clearing in the jungle, a handful of wooden cabins, a pavilion, and fields of crops. It looked like a new beginning, but reality was different. Life in Jonestown was grueling. Members worked long days in the tropical heat, farming and building with little rest. Food was scarce. Medical care was primitive. Armed guards patrolled the compound. Jones's voice blared from loudspeakers day and night, preaching about enemies who wanted to destroy them. Jones himself had grown paranoid and erratic. He was addicted to drugs, his health failing, but his control absolute. He preached that the outside world was evil, that the CIA was coming to kill them, and that Jonestown was the only safe place. He banned newspapers, censored mail, and cut off contact with family in the US. For many members, there was no leaving. Their passports had been taken. Their letters home were intercepted. Anyone who tried to escape was hunted down by armed guards known as the Red Brigade. What had once been sold as a paradise had become a prison. By 1978, concern in the United States had reached a boiling point. Families of Jonestown members begged the government to investigate. Reports of abuse, malnutrition, and imprisonment leaked out. Finally, U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan decided to see it for himself. On November 17, 1978, Ryan arrived in Guyana with journalists and aides. At first, the visit seemed cordial. Jones staged a welcome ceremony with smiling children and singing choirs. Cameras rolled as members praised life in Jonestown. But cracks quickly showed. During the visit, several residents slipped notes to the congressman begging to escape. Fear spread among the group. Jones's mask of control began to slip. The next day, as Ryan prepared to leave with a small group of defectors, violence erupted. At the airstrip where planes waited, Jones's gunmen ambushed the delegation. Congressman Ryan was shot more than 20 times and killed. 3 journalists were murdered. A defector was gunned down as she ran. Survivors scattered into the jungle. Back at Jonestown, Jones knew the end had come. The U.S. would retaliate. His experiment was finished, and so he gave the order. In the central pavilion, hundreds of followers gathered. Jones spoke calmly over the loudspeaker. He told them it was time for revolutionary suicide, that dying together was better than being captured, that their children would be taken, their community destroyed. His voice, slow and hypnotic, convinced hundreds that death was the only way. Large vats of Flavor Aid, a powdered drink, were mixed with cyanide and sedatives. Parents gave the poison to their children first, cradling them as they convulsed. Adults followed, lining up for their turn. Some resisted, but armed guards stood ready. Survivors described screams echoing through the night. Mothers sobbing as babies went limp in their arms. People collapsing in rows, foam at their mouths, bodies twitching before going still. In less than an hour, over 900 people were dead. More than 300 of them were children. Jim Jones himself was found slumped in a chair, a gunshot wound to the head. Whether he pulled the trigger or someone else did remains uncertain. The aftermath was horrific. American soldiers sent to recover the bodies found the jungle clearing littered with corpses, rows upon rows, stacked on top of each other. The air thick with the smell of poison and death. It was a sight so shocking that even hardened investigators wept. The world was left asking, how could this happen? How could one man convince hundreds to kill their own children and themselves? Experts point to a combination of manipulation, isolation, and fear. Jones broke down his followers' identities, cut them off from the outside world, and fed them constant propaganda. Over time, obedience became survival. By the time the final order came, resistance seemed impossible. In the US, the massacre was a wake-up call. It shattered illusions about cults and exposed the dangers of blind loyalty. For the families of victims, it left grief that would never fade. Children, parents, entire families had been erased in a single night. Today, Jonestown remains a symbol, not just of tragedy, but of how ordinary people can be led to extraordinary horror. It's a reminder of how dangerous unchecked power can be, and how manipulation can turn hope into terror. At the site in Guyana, the jungle has reclaimed most of the land. Wooden cabins have rotted away, vines curling through the ruins, but the memory lingers. Memorials in the US list the names of the dead. Documentaries replay Jones's final speech, the chilling audio of a man convincing his people to die. The phrase "drinking the Kool-Aid," once a harmless saying, became forever tied to Jonestown, a grim reminder of what happened when belief turned fatal. The Jonestown Massacre wasn't just the deadliest cult suicide in history. It was a warning to the world that sometimes the greatest threat doesn't come from enemies outside, but from the leaders we choose to follow. Text appears, Jonestown, November 18th, 1978. Over 900 dead. The tragedy that changed how the world saw cults forever.